Today we're going to use the playbook to take a look at Z7 CBM escalations that are tied to repair and overhaul orders. So first we're going to identify those orders, and then we're going to go step by step as to what are the next actions that you would use to try to close those out. So on the right hand side of your playbook, there's that My Action section. And here under Repair and Overhaul, you have the Arno Z7 CBM escalations. And I happen to run it for JetBlue, and it looks like there are two. Now, just a couple of clarifying thoughts on the Z7 process. When the order goes on customer hold, the CSR is the first person that's going to end up emailing your customer or phoning them for resolution on the customer hold. After that, if they can't get a response from the customer, then the business processing resource that's assigned to your pod for your customer, they have the next action to take responsibility for that customer hold. The idea and the goal is that the business processing analyst that's tied to your pod will have enough knowledge about the customer to try to make sure that they own that customer hold from start to finish. The only exceptions to that, where a business processing analyst might go to a CBM, it's twofold. The first is they would go to them over a customer disagreement. So maybe there's a customer hold and ultimately the customer doesn't agree. The second one is if there's any contract interpretation issues. So those are the goals in terms of what we would like the business processing analysts to go to for the CBMs, but in a perfect world, there very well may be other times that a BP analyst may go to a CBM for clarification, for training, just for knowledge and information. So but that's the process as it stands today. It's going to be CSR makes the first point of contact for a customer hold. If they can't get resolution, it should go to the business processing analyst. The business processing analyst in the past was more of an intelligent router to the CBM. We're trying to make the business processing analyst really own and drive the closure of the customer hold. If it meets the two criteria of one, contract interpretation, or two, a customer disagreement, the BP analyst should certainly reach out to the CBM in terms of trying to close out that Z7 escalation. So the Z7 escalation is actually a flag that's on the notification, and it's created by creating a task on the notification, and then in the text, they actually flag Z7 on there. So many times, across your orders, so say JetBlue has 20 repair and overhaul orders, and 10 of those orders might be on a Z7 escalation. Well, because the business processing analyst is going to own the Z7s unless they need to be escalated to the CBMs, that means that out of the 10 Z7s assigned to JetBlue, maybe 2 of them are actually assigned to the CBM for escalation. So the playbook will only show those Z7s that a business processing analyst cannot close out, and the BP person will flag the task as a Z7 that they need the CBM's intervention on. In addition, if that does happen, the BP analyst is expected to do a warm handoff with the CBM. In other words, if they can't solve it, then they will, do the research. They'll contact the CBM, let them know, hey, here's the history on the order. This is why it's getting escalated to you. It's not going to be just, cold handoff where you run the numbers and then you immediately have to go escalate. If you have Z7 CBM escalations and you haven't spoken to your BP person or they're new, then make sure you tie out with your BP person, be proactive about it, and make sure that you have all the information before you start trying to close it out. So I ran this for JetBlue, and it looks like there's 2 Z7 CBM escalations. So I could click on the 2, and it'll take me to the Arno open worksheet, or I can click on the text where it says Arno Z7 CBM escalations, and it's going to take me straight to the actions worksheet here. So it is smart enough to take me to step 2 or action 2, where it talks about how you can close out all Z7 CBM escalated customer holds. So I'm going to click on the checkbox, and it's going to highlight it in green so it kind of keeps your eye on the line. And then from here, it'll tell you here is the worksheet you have to go to, which is the Arno open worksheet, and here are the filters that you would apply. You'd go to the action category column and you'd set the filter on there. And then it goes step by step, the things you would do in order to make sure that you're addressing the Z7 escalation appropriately. So we're going to do all those steps right now. Under the total column, you'll notice here that it's saying there are 2 open Z7 CBM escalated tasks. So I can click on this hyperlink, and it's going to take me straight into the Arno open worksheet. I can scroll to the right, and from here I can use the action category, and I can filter by Arno Z7 CBM escalations. One thing I want to point out, and it's something that I brought up earlier, is that you can have a Z7 on an order, but because of the way we're structured, once it first goes to the CSR, they'll escalate it to the business processing person, where the BP person is going to own that Z7. If they can't resolve it, that's when they're going to flag the Z7 as a CBM escalation. So just as an example, for JetBlue, there are 5 Z7s in total across their open R&O orders. Only 2 of those were actually flagged as the BP person couldn't get through them, and they now need the CBM to intervene. So it's just something to be aware about in terms of, how Z7s get applied to an order and how they get flagged to a CBM and who owns what. So I'm going to unfilter this, but then I'm going to go ahead and use the action category column, and I'm going to select R&O Z7 CBM escalations, and that's where it got the 2. So from here, what I would do is I would probably research the order a little bit more, look at the material, the site, see if it's on a customer hold, and then from there, reach out to the business processing person unless they've already reached out to you already. Then you may be able to just skip this step of really looking at the order details. So let's go back to the action tab, where it's going to tell us what are the step-by-step instructions on how to address these Z7 CBM escalations. So right now, it's telling you to email IM phone or set a recurring meeting with your assigned BP person to ensure that you understand the 2. So in this case, there are 2 that are assigned to JetBlue. You understand the details behind them and what are the required next steps for resolution. If you don't know who your BP person is tied to your pod and your customer, click on the BP pod assignments, hyperlink here, and it's going to pull up an Excel spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet is going to list out each pod, which customers are in what pod, and then the business processing analyst that's tied to your pod. And again, the idea is that the business processing analyst, because they're now assigned by pods, they should have more intimate knowledge of the customer. They should have knowledge of how to escalate behind the customer wall. So for example, if the CSR can't get a response from a buyer for a quote approval, and it gets escalated to the BP person, we would expect that BP person to escalate with the customer. So email the manager of the buyer, and of course, try to get resolution that way, versus the BP person in the past might have just asked the CBM, hey, we can't get a response back. Can you email the manager of the buyer? And along this line of thought, if you really think about how this is going to work, a CBM is going to have to take the time with the BP analyst to make sure they understand how they would escalate behind the customer's wall. It's not something that is going to come 100% to the BP analyst and it's obvious who they should escalate to. So it's just one of those things that if the CBM spends time with the BP analyst and shows them how to escalate behind the customer's wall, it's just going to help the CBM in the long run. All right, so let's go back to the playbook. And we went through the escalation matrix, and I think we're ready to do a recap. So number 1, you're going to use the playbook to identify the Z7s that have been specifically escalated to the CBM. After that, unless the BP person has already contacted you, we highly recommend you get with the BP person immediately to find out, what's the story on the orders that have been escalated to you, what are the next actions required for resolution. And that's it. Thanks for attending today's training and have a great day.